Leaving our Ascot Hotel in the heart of Shanghai on Huaihai Road, we're leaving on a day trip that's going to take up about 10 hours. The city of Suzhou makes a fine day trip from Shanghai to see the Chinese classical gardens, passing some of the skyscrapers of Shanghai. We'll be leaving that behind, and then later we'll take you to a famous water city, kind of like the Venice of the East. It's only 60 miles away, so it takes just over an hour to get there. And along the way to the gardens, there's a very nice pedestrian mall that's lined with shops. They've got artists at work. So this is a very nice package. It is one of the oldest and most famous cities of China. The main attraction for the visitor today are various classical gardens. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and so we were eager to get into the gardens and take a stroll, enjoying these beautiful, beautiful plants, along with some other visitors, of course. We're not the only ones there. This is, after all, quite a famous place. Lovely to have some classical Chinese music performing in the gardens. But as we're strolling around through this classical garden in Suzhou, we can reflect back on the history of this great city, which covers more than 2,000 years. About 500 BC, the prince of the kingdom of Wu ordered his prime minister to build a city for him to serve as his capital. The instructions were to build, quote, a large and influential city where his subjects could dwell in time of danger and where his government stores could be protected from the enemies that constantly menaced his kingdom. The city became the capital of the kingdom of Wu and grew in importance, but in 591 AD, a new city was built for the reason that the old one was full of thieves, whose organization was so strong that it was impossible to drive them out. In the 14th century, following the fall of the Mongol dynasty, and while the Mings were struggling to subdue the whole country, the ruler Shang Xuchang attempted to re-establish the kingdom of Wu, with himself as emperor and Suzhou as the capital. While the imperial troops made short work of the city walls, and the ambitious rebel was captured and executed along with his troops. The most recent restoration of the city walls was in 1662.
Just nearby here, there is a beautiful rock, about 6.5 meters, one of the 3 best in China.
And we complete our stroll through the gardens, passing these many, many potted trees, these small trees like bonsai trees. And they also had a brief Chinese opera skit going on. Now, this was a lot of fun, some live musicians, little action on the stage. And you've got the garden, the music, the architecture, and the town itself, which is really a delight. Adjacent to the gardens, we got to visit inside a historic house. It was the home of Prince Zong, and it's got a classical Chinese garden in the courtyard. Here was his small throne, and this is where he'd hold court to discuss the yearly military operations in his mansion. It's a nice little side visit. Another great attraction of the town is an art museum that was recently constructed in a modern style that blends in perfectly with the old town. And try and guess who the architect was. It's a Chinese-American architect, a very famous, the most famous Chinese-American architect, who happens to be from Suzhou. He was born and raised in this town. He lived in Shanghai in his youth as well, was educated in China in the early years and moved to America. That's right, it's I.M. Pei. He came back to his hometown in homage and built this incredible art museum. It contains some typical Chinese treasures, that we're not dwelling upon as we walk through. We're mostly here, in fact, to look at the grand architecture of the building. It's done really in a kind of a simple way, but every detail is worth observing and analyzing when it's the master at work, I.M. Pei. The way the light comes in, streaming in, the gardens, the pond. Notice the rock formations. Mr. Pei spent a lot of time getting the rocks just right. His family had a rock garden when he was growing up, and he really pays a lot of attention to the fine details in designing this kind of museum. A marvelous experience. And as we came out from the museum, we took another look at this lively pedestrian mall. There's all sorts of things going on. And continuing along this mall, it gets pretty busy. This is a lively place, a big visitor attraction. There's some kind of a peep show. You pay a little fee and you get to look in through the hole and watch a little puppet show or something. We never did quite find out what was going on, but it was of great interest to those people. And then transfer by bus over into the heart of the modern city, another lively pedestrian area. And we're going to find our way to our restaurant. Along the way, we notice these beautician workers. They're out for, it's either a exercise program or they're showing off to attract some publicity. And they certainly did draw a bit of a crowd, putting on a most energetic show for the public. It's just one of those exercise rituals that you find in many of the companies in China. They like to stay in shape. They'll do their Tai Chi, their fan dances, their walking, rhythmic walking, backwards walking, clapping hands while they're walking. And here they're putting on a little dance while they get their exercise. And the downtown Suzhou is a very commercialized area, but very nice for the people who live here. There's a lot of things going on. There are restaurants, there's shops all over the place, there's people out walking, there's a large pedestrian zone, a few scooters going through, of course, and the odd car here and there. And the other commercial streets have got your cars and buses, trucks, and mopeds going through it, and a lot of shops along the way. Oh, the lunch was fabulous. Antonio and Jeannie arranged the menu for us, so we didn't have to do any thinking at all. Just sit down, and they start serving course after course after course. And all for a very reasonable price for this huge banquet, which really is helpful because I've been so busy in the evenings at the expo back in Shanghai. I've hardly taken time to have dinner, but having a good breakfast and a terrific lunch like this is enough to get you through the day.